So I'm gonna paint a birthday card for a friend's kid. It's got unicorn on the back and a unicorn on the front. Now, before we get too far into this video, a lot of you will notice that the comment sections are switched off. I have voluntarily marked this video as kids content, as I am drawing a creature that is usually associated with young kids, and it is a card for a young kid. So, and as I'm also not using my standard acrylic paints or oil-based paints, acrylics stain very easily and are very hard to get off. And oil paints obviously need to use turpentine to wash them down. Obviously kids can't use that because it's highly toxic, so I'm using watercolour paints for a change. So I felt it only fair to mark this one as kids content, though it goes without saying, if you are going to paint and you're under a certain age, please get your parents' permission, and also please put like newspaper on the surface you're working on so it's easier to clean up. So let's get into this. Now, a typical rule of thumb I have is to end with black rather than starting with it, but as the night sky is black it needs to be done first, so I'm just using plenty of water and watercolour paints, as I said at the beginning of the video. So this would obviously take a few layers, so what I usually do is I put one layer down, I go work on something else, then I come back to it. So that's actually what you'll see throughout the video. You'll see it dry, you'll see another layer done, and then you'll see me move on to something else, so it's not all bad. So moving on to the trees here. Now, I was actually using my cheap brand of watercolour paints. They came in a palette from an art shop in town, and they did not work very well. They worked fine for the water, but they didn't work very well for the trees. So I wound up eventually just painting over them with my slightly more expensive brand of paint. So it wasn't all bad. And I'm sorry for the sudden jump in progress. My phone decided to stop filming for some reason, so that's why you're now seeing me painting the water in the background. It's very cool. It's very cool with watercolour paints. Now this is me moving on to the doe in the background, and you again can see I really did not have the best of luck with the cheaper brand of paint, so I just wound up, as I said earlier on, just switching back to my slightly more expensive brand of watercolour paints. So I am still using watercolour paints here, guys. They're just not as runny as the ones on the palette, so they're slightly more expensive. I mean, you can actually tell they're still watercolour paints because I just dragged up the blue in the ponds there. So I'm now moving on to the grass now, and I again wet the paper to get it to fill out and everywhere. So now you can see I'm using yellow to add highlights. I actually learnt this off a different YouTube channel. I learnt it off quite a few, and they almost always use yellow to highlight greens. And I kind of did the same, and then I went over it again with white because I did not like how it looked in the tall grass, so I just wound up painting over it with white. Although admittedly it looked cool around the unicorn's feet, and it looked better when I had more yellow down. So once I had a rough idea of what I was doing, I just simply added more yellow. As you can see, I'm doing around the feet and the squirrel's tail. Now this video wound up being longer than I thought, so I'm gonna have to put it into a few different parts. So see you in part 2.